Hi everyone. So I just want to make a quick video to talk about and highlight how excellent the Royal Grift's research is in the censorship that Prince Harry and his gang are involved in with the governments and whatnot. And this particular clip of the people behind it, Renee DiResta, for example, very dangerous people. I found this particular clip so disturbing. Now, watch how in this clip, she describes how they wanna censor people, kinda like, Jacinda Ardern telling people, "You only get the truth from the government. We're the only truth you come to," right? So she's describing how the problem from their perspective is that people on the internet doing their own, quote, unquote, she uses finger quotes, "research," right? Like, "Oh, you idiots can't research anything, you peasants. You believe what we tell you." So she's mocking people who do their own research. And I have a very one striking example that I know of, and I know you know I know of NXIVM. And it's exactly because people did their quote unquote research, which exposed a criminal psychopath who's now serving 100 years in prison for his crimes, all because everyday people did their research. So this is the type of if it was for people like Renee DiResta and their censorship, had other average person not done their research, people like Keith Raniere and Nexium would still be in power and destroying people's lives and committing crimes. So let's take a look at this clip real fast, real quick.
Vaccine observations now is the idea of the bottom up sense making, where instead of seeing information from a trusted authority or institution, you instead see somebody post something to Twitter or to Facebook, and then people begin to investigate or discern what that thing is, how it fits into a broader narrative, and then oftentimes, unfortunately, the narrative turns into a conspiracy theory. So I think the recognition.
So she's saying investigate. I said research in quotes, so investigate in quotes. People, oh, you people investigate. What a witch.
That if people want information about COVID or about elections, the government and authority and mainstream media are not the only sources at their disposal anymore. They can go from this much more bottom up dynamic. So understanding what's happening within those communities for media and institutions to participate.
So if you really listen to what she's saying,
Yeah, what she's saying is she wants to shut you all up and censor you. She doesn't want this bottom-up approach. They only want top-down. So real quick, I mean, I'm sure this is the expert on cults, Rick Allen Ross, and he's describing Keith Raniere here real quick. Here's what
that
she's.
he was basically a con man, a grifter who took advantage of people all of his life. He exploited girlfriends. For example, I had a call from one of his college girlfriends who was terrified of him. He had stalked her after she had spurned him. And going all the way back to his grade school days, he was a very malevolent, controlling, manipulative person. It was almost like he was like the bad seed, and that he was hardwired to be a psychopath from his earliest recollections. I mean, his family really wasn't a bad family. He claimed that his mother wasn't a good mother. He made all kinds of claims about having a bad childhood. But from what I gathered over the years, his parents were basically pretty good people. And they tried to be good parents and raise him in a reasonable way. But he was arguably just kind of a bad seed. Some people think psychopaths are born. I would argue that Keith Raniere might be an example of that. As he garnered more and more power, he became intoxicated with it. No question about that. The more influential people that gathered around him, the more he felt that he was omnipotent, that he was indestructible.
Does that sound familiar to you? So how did Keith Raniere get so powerful? Well, it turns out he took an IQ test, take-home IQ test back in the 80s or something. and it was from Australia, and uh, he cheated naturally. His girlfriend, I think, answered the questions. But what ended up happening is they ended up discontinuing it after all this. But in 1989, so he cheated on IQ test to get the highest score. So he was put in this one version, one edition that was quickly stopped, and it was all taken out and removed, and they stopped doing it. But he was in print. Now remember, this is back in the 80s, 90s, before the internet took off. So if you saw something in a book, right, you believed it. Like, oh my God, Keith Raniere, the smartest man in the world. Well, that's it. He is a megalomaniac psychopath. He took off with it, and that's how he was able to present himself as the smartest man in the world and got all these people, of all levels of society, high to low, to follow him and pay thousands and thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars to take his courses and listen to him and never question him because he's the smartest man in the world. You can't question him, right? So and because the media was so controlled and there was no internet and people doing their own quote unquote investigation, they had commercials. He was endorsed by that a very popular TV show in the 70s and 80s, Green Acres.
Network marketing company called
Okay, before he did NXIVM, I should mention too. I mean, because he was a grifter con man. He did a what do you call pyramid scheme called Byline, which ended up going out of business because they were exposed for being a scam. But he was endorsed by this Green Acres star in it.
Consumer's Byline.
His name is Keith Raniere. His idea is called Consumer's Byline.
Consumer's Byline may help you.
So because he was endorsed by a very popular, star here.
And a painfully awkward pitchman, 31-year-old Keith Raniere.
So this was his beginning. But you see, because the media was so controlled and people only had TV, putting Keith Raniere on TV like this back in the 90s with a big star, and also with the book, being in print, that allowed him, give him more and more power and fame and more followers. And that led to a path of destruction and destroying so many lives with this cult. And it was exposed by people doing exactly what Renee DiResta doesn't want you doing, which is from the bottom up. People like Frank Parlato. Frank Parlato, here's his website, Frank Report. He did his quote unquote investigation, and he did a very good job. And he has it on his website. You can read all about it, all the evidence and the people came forward about him. He worked with Rick Allen Ross. So my point in this video is just to say that if Renee DiResta and the rest of them, Prince Harry and everyone else, they're working with their censorship complex, if they win and all the information comes from top down, criminals like Keith Raniere and NXIVM would never get exposed, and they'd still be in power and still be destroying hundreds of thousands of lives and scamming people. So this is why it's so important to fight these censors and these people like Renee DiResta who poo-poo little people like you doing your quote unquote investigations. She is a criminal. She is anti-American. She's a treasonous traitor, and their entire censorship complex needs to be destroyed, or we're all going to be destroyed because people like her and criminals like Keith Raniere and NXIVM will be running the streets and running the courthouses and running everything and just destroying people's lives and continuing. So I just wanted to point that out, how important this is. It's far bigger than Harry and Meghan, but Harry and Meghan are playing a part in this, and it's very dangerous for everyone in society if these megalomaniacs get their way.